Brian, do you see the second question down here?
Yes.
I don't know if other people are on this. Looks like we have 19 people in the audience. I don't know if you want to read that question out loud.
Okay, so the question is, do you have any experiences with citrus on the northern edge of where citrus should grow, being grown under cover, plus using water for frost protection during extreme cold events every few years? I'm actually answering that in the chat box. I guess I can answer it verbally also. If somebody can let me know that they can hear this, that would be great.
Hello, audience members. Do you hear, can you hear us? Can you hear Brian's, when he's answering the questions? Yes. Kristen says, yes, we can hear,
the chat.
But we cannot see
they
the
can,
chat. So they can't see these questions.
So to Zach's question in the chat, I think I mentioned earlier, hopefully they heard that, about the waterlogging of the ground and possible drainage issues. We used a lot of cold protection in Florida in the early 90s in inside greenhouses, actually. And because of their substrate, they actually had a lot of water running out of the doors of the greenhouses. So waterlogging is something to be careful of, and making sure you have adequate drainage in your properties. Anybody else have any other questions that I can answer?
Brian, I don't know if everyone can see these questions on the left-hand side of our screen.
Lindy, I've lost your sound. Are you there?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yep, that's better.
Okay. I said, I don't know if people can, yeah, I'm trying to read the audience chat box. So the audience cannot see these questions on the left, where it says, you discuss dew point temperature and its importance. And then the second question there, the audience cannot see those answers that you've written there, because I see one person that asked a question about dew point has not seen your answer. So maybe if you could just, if you've got time, if you could discuss those verbally, I think that might help people.
Okay, so on the dew point question, it is important, but the problem with that is most people don't have access to a wet bulb thermometer. And so it's the general consensus is to start the systems earlier, unless you want to invest in the equipment and the time to do proper dew point estimates. It's just, like I mentioned in the presentation, just from experience, when we were starting our systems up in Florida and the rate that the temperatures dropped, I like to start them up at 8 degrees above freezing. We like to start our systems at 40. If there's a lot of pump stations that have to be cranked up, you need to allow for the amount of time that it takes to get those diesels up and running, get everything engaged, get everything pressurized and checked, and then move on to the next station. The last thing you want is to have something start up part way and be blocked when the cold weather really hits and you get freeze damage from the water that you're applying. Let's see if there's anything else. Starting system too early. Waterlogging. and the dew point question.
The question down here about, do you have any experience with citrus during?
Okay, so my experience on citrus itself is limited to Florida, of course, and Louisiana, surprisingly. We did quite a bit of work in the Louisiana area for their frost and freeze. Now, with other crops that I've been involved with, strawberries in the Carolinas, apples up in Washington, things I've seen in other countries, you know, the basics are the same. Knowing what that terminal point is for the plant material that you're trying to protect, and making sure the system's designed properly to apply enough water to match that precipitation rate necessary for your area. In the Florida market, I think I mentioned in the presentation, we were shooting for that 0.2, which was probably a little heavy. In some of the crops in North Carolina, they're actually down around 0.15 inches per hour. So it's not so much the crop is important, of course, but the freeze is a freeze is a freeze. It's cold. And we just got to make sure we put enough water in the right place at the right time to either thermally insulate it with an ice sheet, or put enough BTUs in the air to raise those temperatures around it. Row covers with sprinklers and strawberries. So are we going to put the sprinklers under the row cover or on top of? Because I've seen both, where they've got the small tunnels and we actually warm underneath them. If you've got one that can stand the water on top of it, and this is where you'd have to talk to the manufacturer of those structures if they can withstand the weight of an ice sheet, then I would say that would work fine. It'd be like an igloo. Once you form that sheet, you're basically heating up everything inside, and it should be fine. The question is, any place that we can find more information of growing citrus in high tunnels and greenhouses for cold protection? Your greenhouse supplier would, he's gonna ask you questions about your crop, of course. And once he knows that, they're going to design that structure to provide that cold protection. We do that with whether it be heaters or some other devices inside a greenhouse. So it really depends on the structure and the climate. Typically, when you're talking to a greenhouse manufacturer, they're going to want to know where you're at, what you're going to grow, what your seasons are, and they're going to look at your weather patterns to make sure that structure is sufficient to meet your needs. Sprinklers on top of the row cover. Okay, it's a floating situation. Yes, it'd be like an igloo. There's probably some concern about the weight on the strawberry plants. I don't think that should be an issue, because we've done frost and freeze protection on strawberries directly with the proper sprinkler spacing and, again, application rate, where we basically just cover that entire field in a sheet of ice, and the plants come out of it just fine. So Barclay's asking again about whether I like the idea of the row covers. I've seen row covers work in a number of crops, and they do a fine job. Again, I would talk to the supplier of those about any structural challenges they would see by applying a layer of ice over top. Did I catch everything, Lindy?
I think we did. Thank you.
I'm going through the list just to look.
A lot of information you're providing. And, your presentation gave us a good contact information on you there at the end. So if anybody wanted to come back to you later, you know, they'll have access to this presentation till April 30th.
Okay. So, yeah, and absolutely. If they want to reach out to us, we can point them in the right direction if we don't have the information available.
Something else popped up from Brian.
Do I know any growers that are primarily growing citrus in high tunnels? No, I do not personally.
I know there are some growers in Georgia who have a few trees in high tunnels, but that's not the primary thing they're doing. There's a couple of people that kind of have a few trees in there in case they have a freeze event. At least they'll have some trees left over, but that's not the primary way they grow.
You know, I've got some places in South Florida that are working with basically shade nets over large tracts, and that's mostly for the disease prevention down there. It's not for cold protection. It's disease prevention, and that's all they're looking at this time.
Okay, sir, I think that's about it. I don't see any more questions popping up. Just everyone in the audience, be sure to sign out for your credits. We need you to, you know, obviously sign in, but also don't forget to sign out. So that shows you were there in the end of the presentation. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, SQM, and most especially thank you, Brian, for doing this for us.
Hey, thank you for inviting me, and thank everybody for attending. I really appreciate it.